Okay, so today we're going to cover fermentation and some aspects of packaging and getting beers to competitions. But before we get on to any of that, let's drink some beer. So for beer number one, we're doing Belgian Wits, which is obviously Hoegaarden. So I've got a massive bottle, which is going to take me all evening to drink, and probably tomorrow as well. We get through a little bit of the description, just so we've got it in here. And have any of you filled in score sheets for this one? No, neither have I. So we'll have to do it on the fly. Okay, so let's get some aroma in while I read this bit out. So moderate malty sweetness, off with light notes of honey and or vanilla with light, grainy, spicy, wheaty aromatics, off with a bit of tartness, moderate perfumey character, off with a complex herbal spice or peppery note in the background, moderate zesty citrus orange flavour, low spicy herbal hop aroma is optional, but should never overpower the other characteristics. Vegetable, celery-like or ham-like aromas, ham-like? Never appropriate. Aromas are inappropriate. Spices should blend with a fruity, floral or sweet aromas and should not be overly strong. The ham-like one interests me. I wonder what whoever has written this has actually tasted. But let's see what we've got. Anyone want to start?
I don't mind starting. I mean, it smacks you in the face with really sweet orange, like candied orange peel to begin with, which I guess is a combination of the actual orange in it and the sweet malt. And then the spices are like black malt and coriander. And whenever I smell anything with coriander in, I always think, not anything, any beer with coriander in. And I've made one just recently. Something screams like sweet red berries to me as well, and I'm not quite sure why. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but I'm sure it will taste of it as well. I don't know if it's some sort of interaction between the coriander and the yeast, but it's like a cranberry, but kind of sweeter, is the way I describe it. And there's it's just kind of all those orange and spice, really. There's not too much malt to it at all.
Yeah, I quite like that red berry thing's quite nice. I could go with even beyond cranberry, something like red currant. But yeah, there's definitely the orange there, and I'd be backing down talking a bit about the wheat. Some sort of grainy notes in there. At least that's what I think I'm picking up.
Seems a little yeastiness too.
Anything more specific yeastiness?
Well, it's not thick and cloying like you'd get at the Bosch vessel. You know, if you sniff that, it's much more lighter and delicate than that, but it's certainly there. So it blends in with the spiciness a little.
Are we talking the sort of the flavors you get from the Belgian wheat, Belgian yeast sort of thing, with a bit of general yeastiness?
Yeah, you get sort of esters, the estery, fruity flavors that aromas that come off the with the yeast from the Belgian yeast.
Cool. So moving on from there, shall we talk appearance? So we're talking very pale straw to pale to light gold, very cloudy from the starch, haze and or yeast, which will give it a milky whitish yellow appearance. Dense white moussey head. Head retention should be quite good. I think that basically describes this beer, doesn't it? I mean, it's the things you'll find with these. It's the most flaws you'll likely find is a poor head, or they're too dark. Because all the rest you can basically get away with on this. So shall we move into flavour? So the description is pleasant multi-sweet grain flavour, often with a honey or vanilla character, with a zesty orange citrusy fruitiness, refreshingly crisp with a dry, often tart finish, Can have a low bready wheat flavour. Optionally, a very light lactic tasting sourness. Herbal spicy flavours, which may include coriander or other spices, are common, which will be subtle and balanced but not overpowering. Spicy earthy hop flavour is low to none, and if noticeable, never gets in the way of the spices. Hop bitterness is low to medium low and doesn't interfere with the refreshing flavour of fruit and the spice, nor does it persist to the finish. Bitterness from orange pith should not be present. Vegetable, celery-like, ham. This ham-like is getting me now. Or soapy flavours are inappropriate. So, what do we think on this?
Is the ham thing coming from some of the comments I've seen around the coriander and hot dog water from Americans? So, you know, there's the association with coriander tasting like hot dogs or cheap ham. I don't know.
Yeah, I expect it's that, or the whole orange glazed ham thing that goes around every now and then. I expect it is an association someone does between either coriander and orange, or some combo there and ham. The other one in there that's interesting is the light lactic thing. That's right on the edge of appropriate, in my opinion. If you have any real lacto in there, you're well out of style.
I'm always amazed. I understand now it's in the description, but some yeast manufacturers will say like this yeast produces a slight sour note to it for a Belgian wit, but I don't think I've knowingly had a Belgian wit which doesn't say sour on it that has been sour. So I don't understand what that's coming from the description. I've just written very similar to the aroma: sweet candied orange, red currants is a better description for it, black pepper spice, which I guess is actually coriander, sweet grainy malt, but in the flavour different from the aroma is there's a touch of kind of banana ester, I think, coming in at the end. But other than that, yeah, very... And everything is pretty much moderately high. It's quite full-on flavour, yet still refreshing.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever tasted one of these that is even vaguely sour. I suspect it may be some combo of the... Some of them can get quite orangey, so you may get a little bit of tart from the fruit. But you shouldn't be getting the bitterness from the zest of the fruit rind. So zest, the inner bit, the white stuff that can get quite bitter on the inside of the fruit. This is a fairly gentle beer. It has quite a lot of flavour in it. I'm not getting much on hop either. You can apparently get spicy hop, but none of the ones I've tried have much in there. But some of the comments here about vegetable and celery-like, I think those mostly come from using too much or old coriander. I've had a few ones in competitions that taste a little bit like that, and my understanding is it depends on the type and the age of the coriander you use in it, whether you get any of these sort of more herbal flavors from it. I haven't done much research on this, but apparently there are sort of two types of coriander floating around. There is just the sort of round stuff you normally get in supermarkets, and there's the more oval-shaped thing you buy in sort of Indian and ethnic markets, and the latter is slightly better. But freshness, I think, is the thing. Any thoughts on mouthfeel?
It's light, and the good carbonation sort of enhances the lightness in your mouth. A good creamy head to it that you can feel. You can feel in your tongue as it goes down.
Yeah, I think that would be the thing I'd be calling out, is the high carbonation. Sort of lightish, medium light body. Maybe a hint of creaminess, and fairly high carbonation, giving it a nice fizziness, which is nice. And not much bitterness in the finish, worth calling out somewhere. Okay, while we're sipping at that, thinking about it, fermentation. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is a little bit about fermentation, touch on about intro to fermentation, hint of biochemistry. I'm going to keep that light because it's fairly dense. A bit about starters and cell count. Touch on pitch rates, yeast strains, bit about bugs, fermentation temperature and profiles, stuck and stall fermentations, attenuation, and a few bits of post-fermentation, so autolysis, packaging, and oxidation and aging. So, fermentation, as we all probably know, is a process that consumes sugar in low to lowish oxygen environments. Usually the products are organic acids, gases, and/or alcohol, so it covers a whole load of stuff. Most fermentation things are industrial processes that we don't really deeply care about. We really care about yeast and maybe the odd bug that's used in beer, wine, and similar things. So, very brief skip through the biochemistry of your standard yeast fermentation. You take some glucose, we turn it into some pyruvate, probably 2 for 1, I believe is the right number, which produces some heat, which causes some fiddly phosphate reactions, and we get things like NADH and NAD+, which basically store energy. We could dive into the details of this, but if you really want to know it, go and read the yeast book. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because it's I'd need to draw diagrams and I don't have a blackboard. So the interesting bit here is the next step where the pyruvate that we've made is broken down into acetaldehyde and gives off carbon dioxide. This is where the acetaldehyde off flavor can come from. If your fermentation breaks, this is the step in the fermentation process that generates it. And if you don't finish the fermentation, that's where it comes from. Then the final major step, that acetaldehyde is broken down to ethanol using the energy from the NAD+, NADH we generated before, which converts it back to the state it was in originally. So NAD+ is the original state, NAD+, NADH is the energized state, from my understanding of this. This is all very academic, things you probably don't need to know to brew beer. Interesting to look at. And you can find a lot more information about it either online or in the yeast book from the Brewers Publications Fundamental Series or whatever they're called. From a brewing point of view, the interesting point is that acetaldehyde is an intermediate step, and having some of that left in beer is a sign that something has gone wrong in your fermentation, causing the yeast to stop fermenting before it's reached the end. So for home brewers and some pro brewers, we need to get some yeast ready for fermenting for our beer. We've got 2 ways of getting yeast, really. There are a few others that are a bit fiddly, which I'll cover at the end. But you basically have wet and dry yeast. The difference really is convenience and the number of strains you can get. The things that interest you, really, from a brewing point of view, are cell counts, which is the number of active cells per milliliter of beer you end up with. And that's largely driven by how old the yeast is. For dry yeast, we're talking about 20 billion cells per gram. Decays very slowly, well, fairly slowly. So old dry yeast can be a problem. So if you end up talking to somebody about a beer kit beer, often the problem with beer kit beers is that the yeast has sat around, even if it's a dry yeast, sat around on shelves for months and months and months. And it's a small amount to start with. So it's been a very small pitch and stressed the hell out of it. It's an interesting question with homebrewers about whether to rehydrate dry yeast. Most pro brewers will rehydrate dried yeast, but most yeast manufacturers will tell the homebrewers not to bother. It will give you slightly more viable yeast cells when you actually pitch it, but you have another risk of another step in the process that can introduce bugs or whatever. I usually do it for dry yeast, but you don't really have to. So the dried yeast comes in a couple of sizes. A lot of people get 11 grams, which is a really odd amount. It's some fraction of an ounce, I assume, or 11.5 grams, which I think is half an ounce, which is fine. There are people who sell 5 grams, which is not really enough. On liquid yeasts, obviously you get lower cell counts. The original packaging, when they're packaged, usually has just about enough cells. But you really need to start to step them up with a starter. You always hear the classic 100 grams of DME per litre, which gives you 1034. Nice and easy stuff. Mix up a starter and make it up. The interesting thing on starters is less what you get with the liquid yeast. The standard liquid yeast, it's a fairly easy process to set up a starter and step it up to the volume you want, because you just start with a 1 or 2 litre or 1.5 litre from one of the calculators. This is sort of the trick. Pick a calculator and use it to do the maths for you. You can do the maths on paper, but it's easier to get computers to do it for you. But the same techniques you use to breed up the yeast from a vial or a snack pack can be used to bring up something from a slant. So if you're looking for really rare yeasts or some bugs, you'll get them as slants. These are agar gel with some nutrients in them inside of tube with literally a streak or a blob of the yeast on it. You're talking very small cell counts here. But what you can do is you can take a sample out of that, put it into a very small starter, sit on the stir plate for a little while, then either pitch that into a bigger one, rinse, repeat for a while until you get up to the cell count you want. It's useful when you do something like that to have the ability to count cells. You can do it pretty much on estimation and guesswork, but if you want to count cells, what you're after is a 400 plus pound microscope and a decent hemocytometer. Hemocytometers are actually designed for counting blood cells, hence the hemo in the name. But what they are is effectively a microscopic scale grid. What you're looking at doing is looking through the microscope at what will probably be a diluted sample of your yeast. So rather than taking a few drops of your starter and putting it into your hemocytometer, you'll take a few drops of your sample, dilute it by maybe 10, and then put it in, because otherwise you're counting forever. You can stain this with, I believe it's a methyl stain, to show you which cells are active or not, because yeast will show you is one of the cells that will do this. And then what you do is within this cell grid, you pick out usually a 5x5 or a 4x4 cell sample and counts usually the corners and maybe the middle, just to pick some random cells out of it. And people use things like knitting counters to press buttons to count it for them, or you can get apps on your phone to do it. And as you count through them, you get your accurate cell count, and then you can work that up and magnify that up to work out how many cells you're going to pitch. This is a non-trivial process. Only beer geeks have a microscope, so I bought one because my daughter wanted to look at cells. And it was a good excuse to have one. So if anyone wants to come and play, unfortunately my hemocytometer is rubbish. So those basically look like a large, thick microscope slide with some squares on the front. Mine's a cheap Chinese one that is really hard to focus on. So once you've stepped your starter up, the sort of question at the end is whether you're going to pitch the whole lot into your beer, or you're going to chill it down, let it all settle out, and then pitch that into beer. Really, that's a matter of taste. The point here is you are going to be diluting your beer down with some hopless wort that may or may not taste nice. if you've done a small starter, it probably won't make any difference. If you've done a massively huge starter, it may add some flavour to your beer. It's worth mentioning here the alternatives. If you're making something really, really big, like a massive imperial stout or a barley wine or a really big dipper, then you can do the trick of brewing a small beer to start with and just pitching straight onto the yeast cake. That works really well and saves a lot of hassle and leaves you with a bonus beer. Should we drink some 312? Go American wheat. Let me find it. It's right at the beginning, somewhere.
Is yours really cloudy? Mine's absolutely crystal clear.
Well, it's slightly hazy, but that was only because I poured the very bottom of it in. I think we'll discuss that as we get into it. Okay, so American wheat beer, which we have Goose Island 312. So, aroma. Low to moderate grainy, bready or doughy wheat character with light to moderate malty sweetness is acceptable. Esters could be moderate to none. Those should be reflected on neutral yeast stains. Banana is inappropriate. Hop aroma may be low to moderate. Can have citrusy, spicy, floral or fruity character. No clove phenols. So who'd like to start us off on this one?
There's not a lot to mine. There's the aroma of this at all.
Yeah, there's some sweetness and a bit of background grain coming across, but on the whole, a bit of vegetable kind of fermentation aroma. It's not amazing on the nose at all.
Yeah, I mean, these are all quite gentle. We're in the standard American beer category. So I did this one. I've got no diacetyl DMS, low grainy background, overlying bread dough and wheat-like notes. Hints of light caramel sugar at end of aroma, spicy hop accent with a hint of stone fruit and lime. Overall aroma quite low, which is what you'd really expect from one of these. I mean, this particular sample is actually hoppier and a little bit more citrusy than the one I broke the score on. So appearance-wise, usually pale yellow to gold. Clarity may range from brilliant to hazy with yeast. Approximating the German Weisse beer style of beer. Big, long-lasting white head. Small, long-lasting white head. If everyone's beers looks more or less like that, then the flavour should be light to moderately strong, bready, doughy, or...
Dave's is completely clear.
Yeah, you hold those up, Dave.
I'm pretty sure my bottle was clear, but then my can was cloudy.
So, yeah, this is quite cloudy and very flat, whereas it passes with a lot more carb.
Yeah, I mean, apparently, well, the clarity should vary from brilliant to hazy, but probably not within one beer, basically. I expect that it's the stuff in the bottom of it that's either come up or not, because the German ones are a non-flocculent yeast, whereas this could be a normal yeast. It's interesting. Variation is always interesting. So, flavour. Light to moderately strong bready, doughy or grainy wheat flavour, which can linger into the finish. May have moderate malty sweetness or finish quite dry. Low to moderate hop bitterness, which sometimes lasts the finish. Balance is usually even, maybe slightly bitter. Low to moderate hop flavour. Citrusy, spicy, floral and fruity. Esters can be moderate to none, which should not include banana. No clove. May have a slight crisp finish. Any thoughts on this one?
The aroma, I'm not getting much here. It's like an American lager. There is more to it than that, than an American light lager, but there's not a lot going on. And certainly, being both big commercial examples, the Hoegaarden and this 312, there's a heck of a lot more going on in the Hoegaarden than this. This is very wishy-washy. Is that a technical phrase?
I mean, yeah, it's quite plain. it's very sweet to me. You're getting a lot of sweetness coming across. Still tastes better than a Budweiser in terms of that. It's not got that watery thinness to it. There's actually a bit of body, even though you'd expect a wheat beer to be thinner. If that makes any sense at all. It's a basic sort of cereal taste. There's not a lot of hops. There's not a lot coming from the yeast.
Let's try to pull what you can out from it. I mean, what you're looking at, I'm still thinking light, small amounts of the sort of grainy thing going on. Maybe wheat, white bread, boring plain white bread.
I'm interested to see if Dave's is really out of date, because I imagine if it is a bottle, because they switched to cans a few months ago, I think. I really think a lot of this is depending on how this is stored, because when you originally put out the list, I went into Tesco and it had been on offer, and someone else had just bought the last bottle. It had been reduced to half price or something. So I wonder how much the storage has affected stuff. Interestingly, the out of date one that I had bought had been kept in a fridge the whole time, so it wasn't in that bad condition. This can that I had, which came from a shelf from Booths in Ulverston, interestingly, I put medium lemony hops, and I can remember it now, thinking, how is this so lemony? I'm pretty sure it's just Cascade. I've never had it taste so lemony before. But other than that, it was, very not particularly strong flavour, anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the can I've got has got a reasonable in aroma hop-wise, this being Booths in Media City, therefore having quite a high turnover. But yeah, as with all of these, I expect how fresh it is impacted a lot. But these ones should be relatively light in aroma and flavour. We're looking at IBUs under 30, so it's not ever going to be a bitter beer. With low to moderate hop flavour. So yeah, I suspect this varies from low to moderate depending on how old it is. I mean, in the can I marked here, I had some citrus and spicy hop elements with medium-low herbal bitterness, finishes the flavour cleanly.
My beer has got 6 weeks to go before it's out of date. Okay. And I know why it reminds me of American lager now. I would swear there was corn in there. There's no corn on the ingredients, but I would swear there was corn in there, like a corn lager, like San Miguel.
Yeah, corn's an interesting ingredient. It actually does have some flavour, unlike rice. Well, I suppose there is a little bit of flavour to rice, but very, very minimal. Any other thoughts on this beer? I mean, all I've added in here is body's medium light with a slight creaminess. He says, trying to read his own handwriting. In the finish, carbonation is at a medium level, perhaps somewhat low for the style, which, yeah, I think this is actually quite low for a American wheat. Yeah, good example of the style with some very minor flaws. Could be great. It's supposed to be a great example of the style.
It's actually probably very hard to brew because there's nothing to hide behind. Why there might be so much variation in the age and the flavour. Because
okay, well, should we move on a little bit? Okay, so we've got our starter made, we've got our yeast ready. So how much yeast should we actually be pitching into beer? There's a lot of different views on pitch rates. Pro brewers will tell you one number. Homebrew software will tell you another. Other home brewers will tell you a different one. But once you've picked a system you're happy with, go with that. But really, it comes down to about 0.75 to 1 million cells per milliliter per degree Plato. I take it everyone knows what degree Plato is. Good. And double that for lager. It does vary, obviously, from that. You need more yeast with a stronger beer, less for a weaker beer. And it is an awful lot of cells when you think about it. When you actually come down to the number of milliliters you have in 20 liters, that's quite a lot of cells. A lot of people will talk to you about overpitching. It is so rarely a problem in homebrew beer. Just throw more yeast in. At worst, you'll have a slightly reduced yeast impact on flavour. Some people say that it's likely to cause autolysis, which is the yeast eating itself after it's died. But really, unless you do something ridiculously stupid, it's not something you're going to likely to find in beer judging or identify in beer judging. If someone has an autolysis problem, it's probably from something else rather than overpitching. You could mention it, but it's so unlikely to be the problem. It's probably not worth it. Underpitching, on the other hand, is dead common. It's one of the multiple causes of things that can stress yeast out in beer, which generates all your usual flavours, your acid aldehydes, your hot alcohols, your phenols. Underpitching is a common diagnosis that when you're writing in what you think might be wrong. You'll probably combine it with a few other options. So you might say, look at your yeast health, yeast pitch rate, and maybe fermentation temperature or something like that. Because you, once again, to repeat, ongoing strain, you never quite know what the person whose beer you're tasting has done. So if you give them a set of options of things they could look at to improve it, and so much the merrier. A lot of things will come down to yeast stress, and underpitching is one of the most common causes of yeast stress. In some judging situations, you'll know something about how the beer was brewed. Occasionally, you'll have something like a kit beer category, in which case you will find this a lot. I'm very, very dubious about kit beer yeast because A, it tends to be 5 gram packets, and B, it sits on top of the pack in a homebrew shop forever. So it's hot and cold and hot and cold and old. So underpitching is a common problem. It's definitely worth considering and definitely worth pulling out if you have a beer that has a yeast related off flavor in it. The other area where you'll likely find things you might want to comment on but don't really know about is yeast strains. I mean, there are millions of yeast strains out there now, and people use all sorts of weird shit in beers. Get out there, try and sample, brew with as many as you can find. It's a bit of a laugh to know what they all taste like. You'll have no idea what the brewer has used, but sometimes you do end up with things you can hint towards. You can make some general calls like alcohol tolerance. If you find a strong beer that has stalled out or feels like it's stalled out, so it's sweet, it's probably got hot alcohols in it, may have some acid aldehyde in it, that's usually a sign that the yeast has died at some point. So if someone's trying to brew a barley wine and you get through one sip, that's all you can drink because you think you're going to die the next day from the hot alcohols and acid aldehyde, it's worth calling about the alcohol tolerance of the yeast, suggesting they go for something with a bit higher alcohol tolerance. Obviously, you'll probably pair that up with things like higher pitch rate, maybe fermentation temperature, but it's one of the things you can put in there. Sometimes you do get weird things like American wheat tastes like Hefeweizens. That's almost always a yeast problem. They've used the Hefeweizen wheat yeast and trying to pretend it's an American wheat. So that's the point. You can call out the yeast that it tastes like it was brewed with a Hefeweizen yeast. Alongside yeast, sometimes you'll get things, and I'm going to mention this several times during this session, with things that are not the yeast they're supposed to be in there. So either wild yeast or bugs. There are a very limited number of styles where wild yeast or bugs are in any way appropriate. In those cases, yeah, obviously comment on it as this is appropriate for style, but in most cases, it's an infection. So you'll get quite a lot of things with Brett in them. So you'll get the leathery, whatever horse blanket means, and the other Brett descriptors in the beer, which are good ones to call out and mention. And you can give some very good feedback from those. Sometimes these infect, and also you'll get the Acetobacter is a common one. Lacto is less common. So the Acetobacter will give you the vinegary ones. Lacto will give you the lemony, yogurty ones. Acetobacter is fairly common. Lactose less so, because in most styles there's too many hops and lacto will just die. So they're usually fairly safe. You need to be fairly generic about where you think this has come from. In some cases it may be during the fermentation, but in most cases it's usually packaging. So when they've bottled or kegged or bottled from keg the beer, that's where it's come from. And then it's become obvious when it's been stored or gone through the posts and got hot and shaken up and reactivated whatever the bug is. In many cases they won't know and won't be able to taste it in the beer that's coming off, say, the keg at home. Bottles possibly more so, but a lot of these come in transport, and the fact that people have taken beer off a keg and sent them through the mail has got them infected, shaken up, warmed up, and that's caused the bugs to come out. Things you can suggest are taking care of their bottling process, perhaps replacing out their plastic so basically in the bottling process, I suggest they swap out tubing and the like, because that's where bugs can live. This is one of the most common ones you get, is beers that have been infected in transport or in packaging. So it's advice you'll give a lot of times. Just be very general about it. Suggest a few things about where it may have come from. Don't suggest specific sanitizers, but improve their sanitizing process, because that's usually the problem. I know I've had beers that got infected in transport, and beer does change in transport anyway, and there's nothing you can do about that. The other side of yeast strains is suggesting interesting ones people may try. So if people have a particular problem with the yeast strain, it's worth knowing the ones that are appropriate for that particular beer. Just stick with the classics mostly. Mostly the dry ones are worth mentioning occasionally. They may have used them, but it's worth knowing about. And also people will ask you about yeast strains in general, the homebrewing circles and homebrewing conversation. It's worth being able to converse about them. Try the various ones out there. In particular, the newer dry strains. There are a lot of new dry strains out there that basically make some of the liquid yeast we've been using over the years less necessary. The other thing you may find people using are mixed sets of strains, and this will mostly come when people come and talk to you afterwards. In some competitions, the people will actually be there and may see their score sheets before they leave, though this is fairly rare. And people may contact you after the competition to ask about scores. In most cases, you will not remember the beer. You can ask the organizer to give you your score sheet back, which will give you some reminders about it. And usually they'll be polite about it, but if they're being mean, just talk to the organizer and they'll sort it out. It's their problem, not yours, even though your contact details are on there to keep you honest. Okay, so should we go to some beer with some flavour then? Next one I'm thinking about is the Hefeweizen. Okay, so Weiss beer. Overall impression, a pale, refreshing German wheat beer with high carbonation. Dry finish, fluffy mouthfeel, and distinctive banana and clove yeast character. Aroma, moderate to strong phenols, usually clove, with fruity esters, typically banana. The balance and intensity of the phenol and the ester compounds can vary, but the best examples are reasonably balanced and fairly prominent. The hop character ranges from low to none. Light to moderate wheat aroma, which may be perceived as bready or grainy, may be present, but other malt characteristics should not. Optionally, but acceptable aromatics can include a light to moderate vanilla character, faint bubblegum aroma. None of these characteristics should be high or dominant. They can often add to complexity or balance. Who'd like to start with some thoughts on aroma?
Well, it's a contrast to the other two. There is plenty of it. Definitely yeasty. Definitely the cloves, as you just said. This is the one with the cloves. It's the stereotypical Bavarian wheat beer. I would. It's the stereotype that others, it's the benchmark.
Yeah, I'm less happy with the example I have today than I had when I writ the score sheet out. What I've gone with is banana sweets leap out of the aroma with a light bread with light grainy backing, slight hints of fresh and cooked strawberry with a barely detectable spiciness, no decimal DMS or acetaldehyde. I mean, wheat beers can vary quite a lot on where they fit in the balance between clove and banana and the strawberry bubblegum thing. It's usually sort of an artificial strawberry sort of flavour and aroma you can get off some of them. Appearance-wise, I keep going to Doppelbock. This should look like pale straw to golden colour, very thick, moussey, long-lasting white heads characteristic. High protein content of the wheat impairs the clarity and unfiltered beer. The level of haze is somewhat variable. This is why I'm slightly concerned about my current example, in that it is definitely amber. Nice head, but it says let me get in front of the camera. That is not pale straw to gold. Yeah, those look much closer.
Yeah, I don't need a chart to tell me this isn't 2 to 6 SRM it's supposed to be. And my other one was like that as well. Really dark.
Yours looks nearly as dark. Dave and Tom's look more like the right colour.
They export the rubbish.
Yeah, keep the good stuff for the locals. So the head seems to be behaving right. There is a particular way of pouring these to get over the massive rocky head, but you need a wheat beer glass to do that. So flavour-wise. Low to moderately strong banana or clove flavour. Balance and intensity of phenol and ester components can vary, but the best examples are reasonably well balanced and fairly prominent. Option light, moderate vanilla. Bubblegum notes can accentuate the banana flavour, sweetness and roundness. Neither should be dominant if present. Soft and somewhat bready or grainy flavour of wheat is complementary, as is a slight grainy sweet malt character. Hop flavour is very low to none, and hop bitterness is very low to moderately low. Well-rounded, flavourful palate and relatively dry finish. Perception of sweetness is more due to the absence of hop bitterness than actual sweetness. Sweet or heavy finish would impair drinkability. So, where are we going on flavour?
I can certainly see the phenolic in there. Again, there's a stereotypical flavours of the bananas, although I've never had strawberry bubblegum until you mentioned it tonight. I can see that, but definitely phenolic.
I think the strawberries and bubblegum are the sort of accent flavours you'll get there. I've had some fairly bubblegummy ones in competitions that taste like artificial strawberry. I have pulled it out. It's there in some of the commercial examples when you start thinking about it. knowing it might be there. It's sort of an extension of the banana, going beyond the he says, trying to remember the name. The compound that gives the banana flavor extends into it's the compound they use in the banana sweets, and it's very similar to the one they use in strawberry sweets.
Is it ethyl acetate?
Isoamyl acetate, it's that one, I think.
Isoamyl acetate, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the one. And that's the compound that you'll get in the banana foam sweet. But then the strawberry bubble gum usually has some of that in it, as well as some strawberry flavors that can come out as well.
I think of all the beers we've had on this course, this one, the description, basically, someone sat down and drank this beer and then wrote the description and then thought about a couple of other beers and added in the qualifying bits. But basically, it's exactly what it says on there, all of the good parts. And then all the maybe stuff isn't in there.
Yeah.
It's, it is the closest to a 50, I think. Well, it's certainly a 20 out of 20 on flavour. It's impressively similar to the description.
But this is a relatively tight description compared with some of them. It actually locks it down to quite a specific few styles of beer. You couldn't have much variety on this and still call it a Weisse beer, which is good. Okay, any thoughts on mouthfeel and overall impression?
I think the main thing is the high carbonation again. You know, that obviously is helping with the aroma and things, but it's a fizzy beer.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, these would be very high carbonation. These are about as high as you're going to get, in my opinion.
I think if it wasn't for the high carbonation, this would be a bit cloying.
Yeah.
Because definitely the wheat has given it a big body, and the carbonation just lifts or just goes through the cloying mouthfeel.
Yeah, I mean the comment on the end of high to very high carbonation, not always effervescent. These should be among the highest carbonated beers, along with a few of the Belgian ones. In number of volumes of CO2 to volume of beer. Okay, skipping back to fermentation. Another common thing you'll find in judging and is in beer brewing in general is the temperatures used during fermentation. There's such a wide range of profiles of fermentation temperature people use, and it's also worth being very aware that thermometers in most cases aren't accurate. Unless someone has gone to the point of actually calibrating their thermometers, they're going to be wrong. It's easy to calibrate thermometers, really, but then you have to do some maths afterwards to actually make use of them. 0C and 100 are really easy to find because of their physical measurements. Anything in between is a bit more challenging, but at least that'll give you some markings about how good your thermometers are. Fermentation temperature is a pretty common problem in homebrewed beer. A lot of brewers appear to brew very hot in the summer and then produce stalled beers in the winter, which is pretty obviously why, because that's the temperature. Also, people in the winter quite often put brewing belts onto their beer without actually any temperature control on them, which takes them back into summer territory again, where everything is far too hot. You'll get beers that will come into competitions with high esters, maybe some phenolics, maybe some hot alcohols, which are basically giveaway signs that it's been fermented hot, or has something else that's done yeast health issues. If the high esters in particular, if you get something that has loads of esters in it where it should only have a bit, your first thought should probably be to comment on fermentation temperature, possibly yeast health at the same time, because that's always a good call. After calling out the fact that the esters are high. This is particularly common in people who are brewing German styles, where the esters should be right down, or maybe non-existent. Low temperatures are harder to detect. Maybe you'll lose esters in English styles. Maybe you'll get a stall fermentation. The other thing from low temperatures you'll find is diacetyl, because yeast will not do the stage where it consumes diacetyl, which was not in our how yeast works from earlier on, because I couldn't be. That's just too complicated to mix in. So this, if you're judging a lager style, if you get a large amount of diacetyl in there, this is a fermentation temperature thing. What we're looking at is making sure they've done the diacetyl rest on it. So at the end of fermentation, they've raised the temperature, or the other options, they might Krausen it, where you pitch in some very healthy young yeast at a reasonable temperature and let that do the job of cleaning up the diacetyl. But in lagers, that is pretty common to get the whole buttery thing, and it's pretty unpleasant. And that's usually due to the fermentation temperature or the fermentation temperature profile, particularly at the end, where the yeast hasn't been allowed to clear up and clean up after itself because it's stalled out and flocculated due to temperature change. And while we're at it, on stalled and stuck fermentations, occasionally fermentations do just stop when they're not supposed to. The yeast falls out and it's a pain to get it going again. This happens to everybody, especially if you brew saisons. You sometimes get this in competitions. They're not that common that people will have bottled them when they've stalled, and it sometimes happens. So they're usually very obvious. They're under attenuated. They're sweet. They taste like wort. It's worth tasting some wort so you know what it tastes like. Yeasty, maybe some acetaldehyde, maybe a lot of acetaldehyde. This could be a stuck fermentation. This is one of the cases where you start making some suggestions back about raising temperatures, stirring up the yeast, pitching some fresh yeast, which is always a problem because you want to pitch some yeast that has some alcohol tolerance. So taking it from a starter might work better than just pitching another dry yeast. Some people suggest adding wine yeasts, so that only works for some beers and some wine yeasts. And my particular favourite way of solving a stuck fermentation, stick some Brett in it. That'll make it ferment. It won't make it the same beer, but it'll make it ferment. It solves all these problems and makes you a good beer anyway. I've done that for several beers in the past, and they've won competitions described as a Bretted X, Y, or Z because they got stuck. And the Brett will eat anything. Which, coming straight off that, leads us into attenuation. Incorrect attenuation for a style is really common. You will end up with very thin imperial stouts, big chewy lagers, pilsners. It's more common. The more common side of it is the low attenuation, where a beer has not fermented out or has ended up with too many long chain sugars in it that haven't fermented. This is usually on the lighter strains of beer, like the American wheat we had before. That if someone had mashed that high, for example, or its fermentation has stalled out, can lead to the high body. So it's worth mentioning, if you find something with a body that's wrong, both the mash temperature thing and the possibility that something's gone wrong in fermentation, the yeast has given up chewing through it, you've got long chain sugars from the mash, which become a fermentation problem. So hints to give people as well as the mash ones, is boosting temperatures late in fermentation. I know my current kit requires a boosted temperature late in fermentation to finish attenuation properly. Or it could be as simple as the fact that it's November or January and they haven't got temperature control and it's just stalled out. It's good to be give quite a lot of options when you have a beer with low attenuation or a mouthfeel problem like that, because there are many possible causes for it. So give them a few ideas and just point people in the right direction. Right. Before we get on to the last bit, let's drink the nice beer. So we have some Vitus.
For some reason, I was expecting that to be darker than it is. I don't know why.
Interestingly, the left-hand one's the Vitus, the light one's the Vitus, the other one is the Tap 7. I would expect those to be about the same colour. Okay, so medium to high multi-rich character in the aroma with bready, grainy wheat component. Paler versions will usually have bready, toasty malt richness, while darker will be richer, deeper malt presence with significant Maillard products. Malt component is similar to a Hellesbock for pale versions or a Dunkelbock for darker versions. The yeast contributes a typical Weisse character of banana and spice, which can be medium low to medium high. Darker versions have some dark fruity aromas, particularly as they age. A low to moderate alcohol aroma is acceptable, but shouldn't be solvency. No hop aroma. Malt and yeast and alcohol interaction produce a complex, inviting, prominent bouquet. Let's get into this one.
So I guess for me, the main difference in the aroma is it's the strength, the alcohol. There's less sweetness. I know it's difficult to say something smells sweet, but you've still got the cloves, you've still got all those yeast products there, the clove, banana. But you're getting almost more of a savoury aroma alongside it, and I'm not picking up the sweetness in the same way that I got with the plain, and whether that's just the strength or the balance. In some ways, I'd almost expect more of a bready aroma coming across if there was more wheat in there, but that's not what I'm getting.
Yeah, so the aroma starts with banana bread, raw and cooked banana, backed by a sugary, spicy cake element. So I think I'm trying to put in here the bread and banana thing together, because I was thinking this was quite banana-y. Hint of rum and slight alcohol with moderate grainy cracker notes. No diamycin or acetaldehyde. So I think that's trying to describe the fact there's quite a lot of alcohol in there. And I'm getting some a bit of sugar in there, but I go that it's not as sweet as some of these can be. Appearance-wise, we're looking at actually, while we're talking about this, the interesting thing here is this is a category that covers really two styles. And this can be the pale version, which we have, or a dark version, which is more like a classic Doppelbock. I have yet to find a dark wheat beer. I don't believe there's a classic example. He says going to look at the list. Dark. There are a couple of examples there, but I've got Aventinus. Aventinus is in the dark, which is a fairly easy one to get hold of. Might be worth having a sample of that if you fancy. Also, because it's a nice beer. We've got Vitus in the pale. They're not as dark as a really dark beer, but they're quite interesting to try. So yeah, this is one of the categories that covers quite a range of beers. There's almost a gap in the middle, and it's an amber one. But you will end up judging a dark beer against a light beer, which can be a little bit tricky because they're not that similar. But try and match them to the style description. Anyway, getting into the description, pale and dark versions exist. The pale versions being light gold to light amber, dark versions being dark amber to dark ruby brown, very thick, moussey, long-lasting off-white head, or light tan in dark versions. High protein content of the wheat impairs clarity. It's often traditionally unfiltered style, although the level of haze is somewhat variable. Suspended yeast sediment contributes to the cloudiness. Okay. Yeah, I think they all do that. Okay, and onto the flavour. Similar to the aroma, medium high to high malty rich flavour, together with a significant bready, grainy, wheaty flavour. Paler versions would have bready, toasty, grainy, sweet malt richness, while darker versions would have a deeper, bready, rich, or toasted malt aroma flavour, with significant Maillard products, optional caramel, low to moderate banana, spice, clove, and vanilla yeast character. Darker versions have some dark fruit flavour, plums, prunes, grapes, raisins, particularly as they age. A light chocolate character, though not roast, is optional in the dark versions. No hop flavour. Low hop bitterness can give a slight sweet palate impression, but the beer is typically finishes dry. The interplay between the malt, yeast, and alcohol adds complexity. Okay, what do we think about this beer and the flavour?
I'm amazed how much malt complexity it has for such a light beer. I've put like cooked apple, plums, and dates, which I kind of expect coming from a dark beer. So I was really surprised by that. The I guess the esters phenols are competing with that flavour, so they seem less. I'm sure they're probably the same amount. The banana seems to have come out more as it's warmed up. And yeah, medium low bitterness. I'm not sure again if it's because it's so strong that it seems less than the others. But yeah, just a delicious beer.
While you were away, Rich, Sam had said about hot dog water, and it's there. It's there is the banana, there is juicy fruit bubblegum, Wrigley's juicy fruit to be specific. Yeah, there's hot dog water there. I've never thought about it before tonight. It's in this beer.
I obviously don't drink enough hot dog water. Or eat enough hot dogs.
It's like horse blankets. It's very acquired.
So what I've written down for the previous version of this was, banana and spicy cake carries through from the aroma with added clove and rich grainy malt. Late flavour adds some strawberry and a touch of cooked fruit ester. Gentle spice, bitterness, and lingering banana round out the flavour. I need better handwriting. Before I do the exam again. I'm quite happily drink a lot of that beer. And do every time we go to booths.
It's 7.7%. You can't drink that much.
I'll do my best. Yeah, so any thoughts on body and overall impression?
It's a little solventy. You can definitely get the alcohol warmth. And the alcohol warmth and the banana flavour sort of...
Yeah. There is an interesting interplay between the alcohol and the banana. I wouldn't go as far with the examples I've got of hot alcohols, but there is definitely alcohol there. Okay, while we sit this gently, let's get through the last bits here. See where we end up. One thing you'll hear a lot about, particularly in older brewing sources is autolysis. This is effectively where yeast is eating itself and causing all sorts of interesting flavors that come out in the sort of meaty, marmitey, yeasty area. A lot of the brewing books, particularly the ones written some time ago, will make this out as a really big risk if you leave your beer on the yeast for more than 20 minutes. If you let the yeast touch the beer, taking out the sarcasm, if you leave your beer on the yeast for more than a couple of weeks without racking to secondary to do anything interesting, like add some more hops or fruit, really, there's almost no evidence this actually happens. I mean, I have, with sour beers, left them on the yeast cake for well over a year, and it's been fine. And lots of people do the same. I mean, the Lambic breweries do effectively the same thing as do the Flemish Red breweries. Some of them may drop some yeast out at some point, but there's plenty of yeast left in there. But that doesn't mean it isn't a thing that happens. It just doesn't happen as commonly as people used to think. You will get this in beers, in judging. You will get those meaty, marmitey flavours that indicate that something odd is going on with the beer, probably to do with the yeast being left in there and eating itself. Primarily, you're looking at beers that have been aged, usually aged in bottles, maybe aged in bulk, but usually the ones that have been aged in bottles, not that you'll ever know. And it sometimes becomes more apparent when the bottle itself has been shaken up a bit, which often happens in competition. You'll get beers that have and bottles that have not been that well treated because the stewards are dealing with 700 odd bottles in your average large scale competition. They will get a bit shaken up. They will not be that well looked after. In the competition we ran last week, our beers were particularly well looked after because we were in the brewery where they had been stored, and Steve had kept them in the cold store all the time. They'd literally moved yards. Often they may be shipped across the city before you end up judging them. They usually should have 5 or 6 hours to settle, maybe, or overnight. But be a bit cautious on this. Anyway, having the yeast shaken up into suspension may make the whole autolysis flavors pull out, but there's nothing you can really do about that apart from mention it in the comments. The other hard side of this is generally to talk about people packaging things. When people are sending things to competitions, they will either be sending you bottles they've bottled some time ago for people who bottle condition. These are usually fine and usually the same as the bottle they've tasted, except for the transport difference. Most of the major competitions happen in autumn or summer, which means they've gone through a delivery service, which is not really good. But then again, some of the problems may have come from when they're actually being packaged. So if you get something that has a infection in it, it may have come from their fermentation process, their brewing process, most likely fermentation, or when they package it into bottles. With bottle conditioned beers, if they've got a wild yeast fermentation in them, usually it's noticeable by the fact the beer hits the ceiling when you open the bloody thing. And this does happen in competitions, and it usually happens to the person wearing the white t-shirt when they're judging Imperial Stout. It's always worth, when you have something you suspect maybe a bottling or problem, to call for the second bottle, which leads to complexities if the second bottle is amazing, but that almost never happens because they then can't go through the second round. It's worth, when you call for the second bottle, looking at the second bottle. The stewards can bring it to you. or you can ask them to look at it, because you can sometimes see things like a pellicle in the bottle. So there's a film of something nasty, well, something buggy, on the top of the beer, and that's a sign something's gone bad in the bottling, usually. You'll get beers with loads of infections in them, and most of these have happened at bottling time rather than at fermentation time. So wild yeast, Brett, sometimes lacto, but it's fairly rare because of the fact it's very hop, very IBU intolerant. Often the Acetobacter, where something's gone wrong. Wild yeasts, it's just the cleanliness of the process. Brett, same again. Lacto, same again. Acetobacter, oxygen is also the other problem there. So you probably want to mention, if you get someone with an acetic problem, looking at how much oxygen is getting into the process at bottling time. With beers that are aged, which you'll get a few of in the more interesting categories, you get some interesting things going on. So oxidation can be a good or a bad thing at this point. You'll get less oxidation in dark beers. Yeah, it's commonly believed that we have some antioxidants in dark malts, but it's not entirely certain what's going on there. But you will get less in dark beer. You'll get the sherry and port notes starting to come through. And in most beers, those are a good thing. If they're an old ale or a barley wine or a impy stout, those are a good thing. But you also start to get the ones that are sort of papery, cardboard-like, musty, and even mouldy, which is not nice, in beer that's been aged for a while. These are another common one you'll get in certain categories, not necessarily the ones we're tasting today, but the impy stouts, the barley wines. You'll start to get the cardboard, the paper, at which point you need to start giving feedback about how to age beer. Mostly this is about making sure that they're as oxygen low or still have some fermentation going on when they're put into their package. Simple things like making sure if they're bottled, they've capped onto foam. It's not that hard to do, but a lot of people make mistakes at that point and they end up with oxidized beer, which is not nice.